Good evening. I'm Dan Colley, the director of the Center for Tropical and Emerging Global Diseases here at UGA. And it's truly a pleasure to welcome everyone here this evening to the first in a new lecture series, Global Health, Voices from the Vanguard. Now, Voices from the Vanguard has grown out of a collaboration between Pat Thomas, the Knight Chair in Health and Medical Journalism in the Grady College of Journalism and Mass Communication, and myself in the Center for Tropical and Emerging Global Diseases, with additional support from the President's Venture Fund. And the series, however, was actually founded more broadly on what some of us perceive as a real desire by UGA to provide its students and faculty with perspectives on global issues, including global health. Now, over the last several years, UGA has steadily and very positively chosen to invest in global health-related endeavors. And it has done this through the establishment of units such as the center that I'm director of, the Center for Drug Discovery, the Biomedical Health Sciences Institute, the Institute for Behavioral Research, the Knight Chair in Health and Medical Journalism, the College of Public Health, and multiple other programs, and the faculty in those programs in veterinary medicine, ecology, agriculture, and the social sciences. Now, such programs have either been at UGA for a long time or are new, but they all bear on global health, and there's actually quite a collection of them. And the purpose of those, obviously, from the university's point of view, is to enrich the milieu of the student experience here at UGA. Now, as we speak this week and next, some of us are working hard to synthesize these multiple successful and burgeoning activities into a broadly encompassing spectrum to try and coalesce interests in global health at UGA. We're doing this by applying through an NIH grant mechanism called Frameworks for Global Health. So, by attending this evening's lecture, you will not only be hearing from one of global health's truly bright stars, and I'll leave it to Dr. Lee to elaborate on our distinguished guest in a minute, but you're also being here is contributing to this grant. For those of you who write biomedical grants like I do, you can look at Voices from the Vanguard as preliminary data. Without preliminary data, you pretty much don't get a grant these days. You can think about it, if you're not in the biomedical sciences, as seed money. Voices from the Vanguard is what we're using, the kind of thing we're using in this grant. So I will definitely comment on the people here and all of those things in the grant. So I'll end simply by saying that we're gratified that each of you has made the effort to come out this evening. I'm sure you'll be fascinated by what you're going to hear, and I hope that you'll come back for the other 3 lectures in this series throughout the semester. Each will be quite different because they're designed to try and introduce you to the ways that people, innovative people, have attacked the problems, the huge challenges of global health. So thank you for coming, and with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. David Lee, our Vice President for Research and Associate Provost.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to add an administrative welcome, administrative but warm welcome to everybody who's here tonight. And I would like to begin by thanking Dan and also Patricia Thomas for taking the initiative to organize what I'm sure is going to be a very important, thought-provoking and informative lecture series, and I'm delighted to be here to help kick this off. It's a series of talks by individuals who I think are truly making a difference in the world, and I think that will be very apparent from the talk tonight. And in that vein, I can think of no better way to kick off this series than with tonight's speaker, Victoria Hale, who is currently founder, chief executive officer, and chair of the board of directors of the Institute of OneWorld Health. So the relatively dry facts here are that Victoria earned her PhD in pharmaceutical chemistry from UC San Francisco, and then moved to the FDA, bypassed the traditional postdoc route, and went right to work at the Federal Drug Administration as a reviewer of drug applications, and spent 5 years doing that. And I think she would say it was an important formative experience, as she gained a lot of important experience working with many drug companies and many, many different drugs, and eventually became such an expert that she became one of the FDA's teachers of how that process works. She then went to the other side of the street and went to work with Genentech, which some of you may know is one of the granddaddies of the biotechnology industry. Got started when I was a graduate student, and is certainly one of the most successful of the biotechnology companies to this date. And I think she spent about 3 years there working in their neuropharmacology division. Well, about 3 years into doing that, I think she got to thinking that there had to be more to life, or there had to be more to a satisfying career, and perhaps her sense of wanting to do something in terms of social action, social justice, led her to take a sabbatical. And she tells me, I think I got this story straight, that after only about 3 or 4 months into that sabbatical, she'd already begun to develop a business plan for what you'll hear about tonight, which is what has become the Institute for OneWorld Health. Over the next couple of years, she actually set up a consulting company to help others with drug development, drug marketing, and so on. But during that time, and that was also providing valuable experience, during that time really helped this, the plan for what she's going to talk about tonight really germinated and developed, and that experience as a consultant was part of the formative period. So as a result of this thinking and this soul searching, she came to the conclusion that what she wanted to do was to set up a nonprofit drug company. And to some, this seems like a counterintuitive sort of thing, a nonprofit drug company that would address many of the world's important disease problems, orphan diseases, diseases that for one reason or another major pharmaceutical companies and government have decided not to go anywhere near, often because there's no major profit at the end of a long and tedious drug discovery and marketing process. And so she decided to pursue this challenge, and I'm sure along the way in the early days got a lot of negative feedback from friends and colleagues who probably thought she was pretty crazy to be pursuing what to many must have seemed like a frustrating and fruitless course. Well, in fact, she's proved everybody wrong, the naysayers, and over time she's gotten a lot of support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. You may know that they're very interested in global diseases. She's had help from the World Health Organization. She's partnered effectively with the University of California at Berkeley. And in fact, now Major Pharma, which had looked at this whole thing skeptically from the beginning, is now looking for ways to partner with her and help her as part of their effort to convince the rest of us that they really do want to do the right thing. And so collectively, with this support, this institute that Victoria has formed is developing and bringing to market, beginning to bring to market, drugs that will be used to treat a variety of very important global diseases, such as malaria, such as forms of diarrhea, Leishmaniasis, and others. And so this is, as you'll hear, a remarkable story. And predictably, Victoria has been recognized increasingly for her pioneering and inspiring efforts. In 2003, she was selected as a Leadership Foundation Fellow of the International Women's Forum. In 2004, she was named to the Scientific American 50, which is an annual list recognizing outstanding acts of leadership in science and technology. Also in that same year, she was named one of the outstanding social entrepreneurs by the Schwab Foundation for Social Entrepreneurship based in Switzerland. And in this past year, 2005, she was named the Women of the Year by the Women Healthcare Executives Group. And she's also received other honors, including being asked to be an advisor to the World Health Organization. So I don't want to take any more time here, but I did want to give you the background for this remarkable story. So without further ado, please join me in thanking Victoria for being here tonight and being the person to help launch this important series. Victoria, we're really delighted that you're here. Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure to be here. We've talked about this, Dan, for how long? About a year? I think so. I'd like to begin with one little story about Dan, who was a founding scientific advisor of the Institute for OneWorld Health. I came to visit him while he was still at CDC, director of parasitic diseases. And I said, I'm going to start a nonprofit, and I'd like your advice. I'm going to pursue parasitic diseases, and why? Because we know the pharmaceutical industry will admit that that is not an area where we would be competing. And which disease should we pursue? Dan had his ideas, and every advisor that I spoke to had their own ideas. And I asked him in the end, do you think it will work? And he said, well, I think you're on the right track, and I think you should give it your best shot. Now, some advisors who I've talked to after the fact have said, you know, I never did believe that this was going to work. I couldn't tell you that at the time. I kept it to myself, but not true for Dan. He hoped that it would work. So I can say that he was an early believer. So thank you, Dan Colley. Okay, so I have a few slides regarding a few of the diseases that we'll talk about here and a little bit of statistics. Then we'll get into background of the pharmaceutical industry in this sector and these diseases, and why OneWorld Health needed to exist, or a nonprofit pharmaceutical sector needed to exist. And I'll go through our lead program in Leishmaniasis, and then a bit about another program of ours, a malaria project with a university, UC Berkeley. And then I'll wind up with a zinger for you, a real challenge to you who are sitting here and your friends nearby. So let's proceed. I'm going to turn this a little bit. So I have to point toward this, right? Let's see. Good, great. So the text is very small at the top, but my major point here is there's tremendous need. This slide presents for you overlapping burdens of tropical diseases, including malaria. And the darker sections the darker countries are ones that have tremendous number of diseases and inordinate burden. The hatched sections are ones, it's hard to see, where malaria is of highest incidence. Maybe we could dim these lights a little bit. Is that possible? This is going to be a challenge. Great. I think I may take you up on your offer to flip the slides, please. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, so a little bit about why these diseases are important. And I know that those of you who are gathered here at 6 p.m., you should be eating dinner, but thank you for coming, know that these diseases are important, and you do care for them and people with them, or you wouldn't be here. These diseases are listed in order of the number of deaths that they cause globally, individuals of all ages, so adults and children are combined here. And we see that Africa is disproportionately represented, particularly with malaria deaths and HIV. Respiratory infections and diarrheal diseases are the #1 and #3 killers. And those are particularly complicated because multiple pathogens are involved. And I propose that the world has shied away from, and scientists have been hesitant to tackle these diseases because of the issue of multiple pathogens, and that we need to do better. And we need to learn to work together if we're going to get at the #1 and #3 causes of death in the world. And we can do it if we come together. In Asia, the leading causes of death are respiratory infections, diarrheal diseases, and TB. So you can find these data on the web. It's a place that I, next slide please, educated myself. Growing up in the US, I can say I didn't know much about what was going on elsewhere in the world. A little problem arose for me as a pharmaceutical scientist. Once you know that certain drugs aren't being developed and they could be developed, how can you not act? Once you know, how can you continue doing what you're doing? These are, back one slide, yeah, sorry. Just again a reminder that the African continent disproportionately suffers from deaths due to infectious diseases, with Asia and the Middle East in the middle. I was surprised to see, this is data from Jeff Sachs, that Europeans have half the number of deaths from infectious disease compared to the Americas, and I suppose that is all of the Americas, and that's why it's different. Okay, next slide, thanks. And why do we have these problems? Why are there disease disparities? And then why are there, as a consequence of that, no new drugs for some diseases, no new vaccines for some diseases? And that is poverty. It's the ability to pay. It really is that simple. It's unfortunate, but the good part of that is if it's simple, then perhaps there is a remedy that is within reach and that one can imagine and that one can put forth. Next slide, please. So the problem with a large part of the world living in poverty and a small part of the world not living in poverty is that the small part of the world that has the resources gets the investment, the R&D in everything, in technology, but in particular, this slide conveys the 1090 gap and R&D for health. And consider the last phrase on the slide. We all have known one person or one family in our life who has experienced the death of a child, and it is a horror, an absolute horror. I hope it hasn't happened to any of you in the room, but it's a very rare occurrence in our world, and we're blessed for that. And it is obvious, but I think not stated enough, that 98% of the deaths of children or the deaths that occur during childhood occur in the developing world. Just devastating. And it shouldn't happen in this new century. This is a photo that I took of young girls in Bihar state of India. It's a very poor state in India where we're doing our first program. Next slide. So, global health inequities, what are they about? What causes them? If we understand what causes them, then maybe we can do something about them. #1 is poverty. We can go through the list of others, but basically, if you, again, are very, very poor, you have different diseases, okay? And because those diseases are so different, organizations that develop new medicines, and I'm not sure that you realize that almost all new medicines in the world, if they are Western medicines, not traditional herbal medicines, are developed by Western pharmaceutical companies. They may not be discovered by Western pharmaceutical companies, they may be discovered by universities, yeah? But they are developed by Western pharmaceutical companies and go through regulatory agencies. So we need some time for companies in India, okay, in Asia, in India and in China to learn to do the new drug R&D process. And maybe some of this will change, although I'll say to you that in my discussions with companies in India, their target markets are the same as pharmaceutical companies in the West. So we may maintain this problem of no new drug R&D, even though pharmaceutical companies develop the skills elsewhere in the world. Let me add as well, I believe that the world was more concerned with these diseases when colonialism was in vogue, in fashion. When European countries pulled out of its colonies, their colonies, they pulled away their passion and energy and finances and resources as well, unfortunately. If there is anything good that can come from the militarism that is occurring in the world, this little editorial on my part, it would be that it puts Westerners back into parts of the world that we pulled out of decades or centuries ago. And I hope that turns out to be the case. Okay. So the neglected diseases, the really neglected diseases, are not anymore HIV, TB, and malaria. We have a little disagreement about that in the global health sector. I have malaria here on the list. But the general consensus is something's been going well in global health. There is quite a bit there are quite a few resources being applied to HIV, TB, and malaria. That still leaves a long list of diseases, however, and diseases that affect half of the world. If you're talking about nematodes or worms. Diarrheal diseases is an arena that we're moving into, and it's a tremendous market if you think about it. The top four there, the first two being enteric, and then malaria and schisto, one of Dan's favorites. Tremendous markets, but they don't attract industry. They just don't have the ability to pay. Oh, go on, next slide, thanks. So for malaria, just for example, deaths in Africa, okay, almost all deaths from malaria are in Africa. And the mortality is compounded by poor public health infrastructure, lack of access to new medicines, lack of education, but most importantly, I believe, the social, political, and economic turmoil that leads to or supports a lack of will to make a change. And I'd like to demonstrate by this slide and make one point here. We all work very hard in technology. We live in a part of the world that's very technologically oriented. And if a technology is developed, we'll have access to that technology. It will get to us. That is not true in many parts of the world. We can work our hardest, and a miracle can happen, and we can develop a malaria vaccine. That would be a miracle at this point. That really has, incredible coverage. And that doesn't mean that it would save lives right away. There are huge issues after the technology is developed. There are huge issues after regulatory approval, and they don't involve high technology. They involve low technology. They involve going out into very rural places and education and working with governments and generating a will and a force to make something happen. Thank you. So malaria right across the middle, a belt around the middle. Next slide. So focus on drugs now. Doctors Without Borders did a quick survey of all drugs approved in a 15-year period. So about 1,400 of them, and 13 of them, 1%, were approved for tropical diseases, 1% of new drug approvals. The catch to this is only one of them was approved for a tropical disease in humans as its first indication. So this counts second indications, et cetera. Most of these drugs were approved for veterinary disease, okay, for agricultural purposes first, the animals before the people. It's very unfortunate. But let's turn that into an opportunity here. We can go to and work with veterinary health, animal health companies, right? They do have these leads, and they are still in the parasitic drug business. And some of these drugs as well were approved for other indications, oncology, for instance, and then came to tropical diseases. So it's very sad and obvious that you saw the list of the number of tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people who have tropical diseases, that we have these numbers, these percentages of new drug approvals. So the world has not stood by idly, and I and my organization and our colleagues and friends were not the first to come up with a solution. The world decided about 10 years ago that there should be public-private partnerships. Okay, so that's the PPP. Public always comes first, as it should. The public sector players are the leaders in this. And public-private partnerships were developed in response to this market failure. We don't like to say the word market failure when we're talking to pharmaceutical companies. If you want someone to partner with you, you don't like to, rub it in. But that's really basically what it is. These programs were generally funded not by private corporations, or not by corporations, however. They were generally funded by the public sector. There are about 16, I think, that exist now that develop drugs or vaccines or diagnostics. And it works reasonably well for those 3 big diseases, which I opened with to tell you they're not so neglected anymore. And one of the reasons they're not so neglected is these exact public-private partnerships that have been able to bring pharmaceutical companies together with the World Health Organization and with universities and with various players, governments, et cetera, and make this happen. But they're not perfect. Next slide. And these are the reasons. This was part of my strategic analysis of what was needed. So early on with public-private partnerships, it was pretty clear to me that we wouldn't be able to, it would work for a few diseases, but we wouldn't be able to attract a company to develop a new drug for onchocerciasis. It just wouldn't happen. Leishmaniasis. The list goes on. So it worked for some diseases, but not for others. Our first choice was a good old drug that was off patent, an old aminoglycoside, and it was a piece of low-hanging fruit that really was a sure shot. It is a great first product, but it never would have worked in the existing public-private partnerships because there was no intellectual property around it. Nothing that anyone could own. A generic company anywhere in the world could make it. That's okay with us, but that's not okay with pharmaceutical companies who participate in public-private partnerships. Not yet anyway. It may be in the future. The mission of these public-private partnerships is often quite narrow, as it should be. You need to focus on, for instance, the Medicines for Malaria venture, extremely successful in bringing forward new medicines, still in the research stage, the newest ones, new mechanisms of action for malaria. Where do you fit a drug that is old, okay, or off patent in that sector, in that PPP? You don't. Where do you fit a new technology to address the shortage in artemisinin that exists? Well, you don't. It doesn't fit the mission. So these PPPs that exist to develop medicines have to stay narrow, except the technologies are not narrow. The beauty of technologies, and in our society, the beauty of science is that the discoveries are as wide as we imagine they are as broad and creative as we allow them to be. So we wanted to be an organization that could take on some of these more creative projects that didn't fit elsewhere. And they're dependent on philanthropy, as we've talked about. That's okay when you're in the research phase, but as these research programs are successful and move up into real drug development programs, it gets quite expensive. And our philanthropic organizations, such as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, going to be able to fund the development of 3 antimalarials at one public-private partnership, and 8 diagnostics for tuberculosis at another public-private partnership, and 4 different vaccines for another disease elsewhere. I don't think we can ask one foundation to do that. I think that they've made it clear that they want other funders to participate. Next slide, please. So, I'll tell you what really inspired me first to believe that we could do this. Once you learn what's going on with global health and how many needs there are, the solution becomes, or how many opportunities are there? So within our sector, within the pharmaceutical sector, the beauty of it is it's a wealthy sector, and there's a lot of money put into discovery. Okay, so many more discoveries are made than can ever be developed. And much of that is what should be mined and pursued for leads for potential new medicines. I think I'll skip the rest, but basically huge untapped potential opportunities. Next slide. So why a new player is needed. Many infectious diseases lack R&D programs. No one's developing new cures. In addition, there is a tremendous gap between the cultures and the language of the very technical pharmaceutical industry and global health players. There wasn't anyone effectively working that gap. The World Health Organization does its best, but it is a small organization with very little funding. And it appeared to us and to me that there needed to be someone who could bridge the gap, who could speak to people in global health community about what was needed, what the product would need to look like, what it would need to cost, and work with pharmaceutical companies to make that happen. So, just a reminder, 1 billion people live on less than $1 a day. They need to eat, sleep, dress themselves, children have shelter. About 3 billion live on less than $2 a day. So our products have to cost pennies, our drugs. So OneWorld Health was formed with that recognition of tremendous opportunities that come from universities and academia, and a very large number of extremely committed scientists in my industry who would say to me, if you start it, I'll come. You know the movie, what's it called? If you build it, they will come, about the baseball team. What is it called? Field of Dreams. There you go. This is the way OneWorld Health has turned out to be. It's very cool. There are many passionate scientists who say, you know, I chose this field, I chose this sector because I wanted to help someone, and I can't remember the last time I felt that I did after a day's work. I work hard, and my company's good to me. And you know something? I'm not ready to leave quite yet. In many cases, I have a mortgage, I have kids, I have golden handcuffs, but I want to volunteer for you. Or you know something? I'm up to here. I want to leave. So we have many more volunteers than we can use, and wonderful opportunities to tap great employees. So we have about 50 or 55 employees now. We couldn't do any of it without philanthropic investment, and almost all of that funding has come from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, $140 million to date, just tremendous. And we are but one small nonprofit organization in San Francisco. We will open an office in India, but we can't do this without a very large number of partners. And a lot of what I do is work on trust and building relationships and maintaining relationships. People who work in this sector and companies who come into this sector do not do it for business reasons. It does not make business sense to engage in any of these diseases. You're here because you want to be here, and it's about personal relationships. So to recognize that is very important, and it takes a lot of energy to maintain them. Across cultural barriers, age barriers, all kinds of barriers. So OneWorld Health is a simple experiment designed to model the successful pharmaceutical industry. Really, is it this simple? Could we just remove profit and keep everything else the same? So that's what we did. Our first project had to be successful, had to be quick, had to be inexpensive. Otherwise, no one would fund us further. We focused on research and development, in particular development, and we focused on drugs. We do have one vaccine in our portfolio, and that's a little bit of an experiment. We have a very strategic selection of drugs. We did not want to have to develop a sales and marketing force. Okay? So choose a drug that will be distributed by others, or can be distributed by others, so that you can just orchestrate and watch. That's naive, isn't it? Watch that distribution happen. It's never like that, but to approach that. And our first program is in India. We need to go to Africa, and we need to go soon, but we also needed a government that was committed to a particular disease and a reasonable amount of infrastructure. So OneWorld Health, this is our mission statement, develops safe, effective, and affordable, for the poorest people in the world, new medicines for diseases of poverty, for people with diseases of poverty. We identify promising drug candidates. We've had lots of them sent to us. We've had some beautiful insecticides, some fantastic advanced bed nets, some incredible rehydration solution. We really try to focus on the drugs. There are lots of great technologies that have nowhere to go. And we propped up as a nonprofit health something, and when you Google us, you find us. And so we have great opportunities that we'd actually like to share. We'd like to put out publicly rather than just say no thank you to. Like to have a place for them to go in the world so that people know about them. We complete animal and human clinical trials. That's our primary work. We're in downtown San Francisco. Picture this, we don't have laboratories. We're counting on you to have done the research and for you to have taken the work as far as you can, maybe with a company, maybe not, and then we pick it up and move it from there. The work that we do truly depends on the work that comes before us and standing on the shoulders of others, leveraging the work of others. There is plenty of quality manufacturing in the world. We do not have a factory. I think it would be a great idea to set up manufacturing facilities in the continent of Africa, have Africans run them and make their own medicines. It's very empowering. But at this time, we use opportunities that exist in India, tremendous manufacturing facilities. We'd like to learn more about China in the near future. And we take it all the way through regulatory approval. Next slide. So, our guiding principles. The first, and we got this right away with OneWorld Health and talking with big pharma executives. We passed our business plan through 4 retired CEOs, and we were uniformly rejected and criticized because they thought we were going to compete. So we made that very clear. You didn't read our target diseases. You know, can you even pronounce them? I mean, really, trypanosomiasis and Leishmaniasis, come on, this is not diabetes and it's not hypertension, it's not even oncology. There are Western diseases that lack therapy. There are many orphan diseases that need therapy. We have been, I don't want to say tempted because we weren't tempted, but there have been organizations who have come to us in the US to ask, can you please help us with a Huntington's disease drug? We're ready to go now. We've been doing research for 30 years, or a Parkinson's disease drug, and we've said no. There needs to be a path for those, but it won't be at OneWorld Health. Do not duplicate available resources. That's use the manufacturing in India. Focus on development, not research. You do the research and we'll do the development. Be a bridge between those 2 sectors that don't speak the same language or the same culture and don't particularly like each other, to tell you the truth, or respect each other. Sustainability is an issue for any organization, any nonprofit, and I do believe that OneWorld Health can be partly sustainable in the future. It is important, however, that our decision of which drugs to develop and which diseases to work in not influence, our desire to be sustainable, not influence our decision of which drugs to pursue and which diseases to work in. Because if we were only to pursue TB, malaria, HIV, where there is some small Western market, then those very neglected diseases would be very neglected again. So we always will have a mixture. And everybody has to enjoy themselves or this doesn't work. Everyone has to want to be there, and keeping that scenario rolling as people change, as a project change, is really a challenge. Keeping all your partners at the table. So we focus on diseases. Oh, no, this is not what I wanted to say here. This is what OneWorld Health has done that is, I hope, provides a take-home message for you if you care to do something like this in the future. And it is that we have focused on diseases in new and creative ways with the technologies that we've brought in. We chose parasitic diseases where there have been, as yet, no vaccines, but drugs do cure, drugs do save lives. We have believed in and studied old drugs and old technologies. Just because you're new doesn't mean you're better than everything else that's out there, is our philosophy. We adopt high-risk, high-reward projects that do not go elsewhere. And I encourage you to consider that as well, but I would say that shouldn't be your first project. You should have a project that's a sure shot, that's in the bag, so to speak, and then consider these high-risk, high-reward programs. We work hard to provide industry with opportunity to participate, and we're talking with all of them now. It's really wonderful. It's been a fast forward in my mind, the time in which it took for it to switch between us knocking on industry's door and industry knocking on our door. We said, we want a partner. And they said, well, we'll watch and figure out who you are and if you can develop a drug, and then we'll decide. And now they're all coming to us, which is glorious. Then we can initiate more programs and pass them on, and find more opportunities and license them out and get more done and advance global health and engage the industry. If we don't engage the industry, then we're kidding ourselves really about what can be accomplished. So we need to work with industry. And you know something? They want to do it, they just have no idea how to do it. They haven't thought about it. So they're you need to think differently. Okay. So we like to say that we focus on the middle of this slide, the development, the D. So we work on various formulations, preclinical studies, clinical trials, technology transfer for manufacturing, and then regulatory approvals. In reality, that was the case for our first project. But we need to back up and move forward with some of our other diseases. My challenge as a CEO of this organization is to not have us spread too widely. I'd rather have us do fewer projects and finish them up and do them well than spread very broadly and be overwhelmed by the number of disciplines that we're engaged in and the number of activities we have or the number of projects that we have. Okay, next slide. So this is our pipeline. Paromomycin will be submitted, the dossier, regulatory dossier, to the government of India this quarter, Q1. So we expect an answer shortly thereafter. And we hope for an approval, and that's all that I can say. We don't know, and you really do have to wait. And having been at FDA, sometimes companies are surprised. I would be very embarrassed if I were surprised with this one, having led this company for some time. We have a small Chagas disease program. We have a large artemisinin program that I'll tell you about in a bit. And we have a diarrhea disease program that's coming. We haven't announced that one yet. And a malaria vaccine. I think I have to speed this up because we have a little slide to show you. Next slide. Oh, this is visceral leash. Okay, then we'll get to the video. Our first disease, visceral leishmaniasis, KALAZAR, black fever, we chose because it was perfect. It was in a region of the world that was contained. It is a disease that has no animal reservoir, well, in this part of the world. So if you can treat people and kill sandflies, then you can eliminate the disease. Just a tremendous possibility. The disease was primarily affecting India, primarily one state, and spreading radially out to Bangladesh and Nepal. Next slide. We had Newsweek produce a 5-page piece. Did you see it this summer in the special health edition? 5 pages on visceral leishmaniasis in Newsweek. That's a dream come true. This is one of the photos from the photographer. This is one of our physicians in the blue plaid shirt, diagnosing VL in the field. This is another one of our sites. The balding man is another of our investigators. Notice on the upper right that he was trained in London and Edinburgh, and he came back to Bihar. All 4 of our investigators, Leishmaniacs, trained in the UK. And then came back to run KALAZAR clinics, just tremendous. One lives in Varanasi now, and commutes. Next. This is me learning to palpate livers and spleens with one of our investigators. Next. And our first drug, beautiful Paromomycin. Again, an old antibiotic. I've said a lot of this already. The cost per cure will be between $10 and $20. Sounds like a lot if you think about malaria cures. If you're really cured from visceral leishmaniasis, it really only happens once in your life. And present cures are between $100 and $200. So this is a tremendous advance. It's a 21-day intramuscular therapy once a day. We're doing a trial soon that will examine whether 14 days is sufficient if we increase the dose, which would make it by far the shortest therapy. All the other therapies are 28 days or longer. So we're very thrilled with this product. But it's not approved yet, I have to say that. Emphasize. Good. This is one of our clinical sites. This is inside one of the buildings that you saw a photo of. Notice the beds have, they're nice metal frame beds, and the floor is pretty clean. I think they did clean up a little bit before we came. But there are no mattresses on the bed. They're just cloth. The patients are packed in. Children sleep 3 to a bed in epidemic situations. KALAZAR is it's a pretty bad way to die. Not that there is a good way to die, but you have basically pancytopenia. So you die of opportunistic infections, a lot like AIDS. You die of the complications of severe anemia, or you die from hemorrhage. It's It's a very bad way to go over a period of a few months. So it's an agonizing, protracted suffering. Next slide. And we received a $30 million grant. All the work that we did in the development of Paromomycin was $17 million. It actually cost more than that, probably about 25. We're going to cost this out. But we had so many volunteers, we were able to do it for 17. We got a grant recently from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation for $30 million to figure out how to get this product out there. Remember when I said we don't do distribution? Well, we don't, but somebody has to do it, and that'll be the government of India. Well, and the disease exists because some government didn't do its job, yes. So the government of Bihar, and we're relying most heavily on nonprofit organizations, and a little bit on the private sector.
From ABC News headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight.
Tonight, ABC News, together with Time Magazine, is launching an unprecedented week-long series, Prescription for Survival, focusing on global health issues that affect all of us. Tonight's subject, the world's worst diseases, and why most of them are ignored by major drug companies, despite the fact that they make millions of people sick. ABC's Judy Muller reports from San Francisco.
They're called neglected diseases. Parasitic illnesses that afflict millions of people in poor countries, mostly in Africa and Asia. Neglected because most drug companies don't make medicines for people who cannot afford to pay.
These people don't represent a market. There's no return on investment there.
Black fever, almost 100% fatal. Elephantiasis, more than 40 million people disfigured. River blindness, more than 250,000 blinded. Sleeping sickness, also fatal, spread by the tsetse fly. And the big killers, malaria and children's diarrhea.
These neglected tropical diseases aren't being neglected by everyone. They're getting the attention of one organization here in San Francisco. The Institute for OneWorld Health is the nation's first not-for-profit pharmaceutical company.
Hi, Victoria.
Company founder Victoria Hale is a former pharmaceutical scientist who came up with a solution. Look for existing drugs that had been dropped by the big companies. Drugs that could be used to cure these neglected diseases. Her first target, black fever.
You hemorrhage and die. It's a terrible way to die.
Using an off-patent drug called Paromomycin and funding from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, OneWorld Health has finished clinical trials in India that cured 94% of the patients. Great progress, but there are a lot of other parasites out there.
The problem with infectious diseases is the bug that you're going after changes, it mutates, it develops resistance. So you have to keep developing new medicines. And it is that which is not happening.
Drug companies, of course, are businesses, not charities. But some are getting involved. Merck took an existing heartworm medicine for dogs and turned it into a very effective treatment for river blindness in people.
We were lucky enough to find something that worked, and we've done what we can to make it available. In fact, we've donated more than 1 billion tablets.
Even so, the diseases that afflict 90% of the world's population get only 10% of the health dollars. Most of those dollars go to Western lifestyle problems, cholesterol, digestive problems, erectile dysfunction.
I am frustrated. I understand it, though. And I believe that the way to address it is not to go in and change this enormous system that exists, but to build a system that can work with what already exists and to make it happen.
And in one corner of the world, this one company is doing just that. Judy Muller, ABC News, San Francisco.
So it is a big deal when ABC News talks about black fever. It really is. So a lot of good things happening. Now I'm going to wind up and get to that zinger I told you about, that challenge for you. But let me talk for a moment about social entrepreneurship. And then I actually do want to talk about one of our high-risk, high-reward projects. We've won several awards for social entrepreneurship, and people have asked me, how do you define it? You can Google it and find a few definitions. I don't want to define it, I just want to share with you my thoughts. So the world needs all of us. We're all here for a reason. you may have found your reason, and some of you may not. If as you're wandering through the world, something tugs at your heart, stop and listen. It's important to listen. It's important to be quiet. We live in a noisy world where time for silence and the silence itself doesn't exist. So just a few words to contemplate for you. So I'm not going to be silent for you. Okay? Examine that world and this world and find a significant problem, one that means something to you but that doesn't overwhelm you, one that's really hard, that really does something to you. You're going to need that in the hard days, in the dry periods. You're going to need that heartfelt reason to get you through. Identify opportunities. Don't focus on the problem. Focus on the solutions. Talk to lots of people and study the work of others. There have been some pretty impressive efforts that in the end, if people had just consulted with mothers who treat babies in the developing world, you would know that formulation will never work, or that price is never going to do it. There are lots of people in the world who've thought about what you are thinking about tangentially. Acknowledge that there will be obstacles, there will be problems. There are in your laboratories every day, and there are in any work that you take on. Sometimes the problems are people in a situation where you're impacting a global health situation and you want to affect change. So be aware that it isn't always an experimental problem. It can be a personal or human problem. And then persevere. Really, it takes tremendous passion, and keep that vision that you evolve over time. And then stick with it till you finish it. There are also lots of great ideas that when the work gets hard, when the well goes dry, people say, that's it, I've done all that I can. And it's often just after that next mountain that you have success, that there is that oasis, that little bit of water that you need to continue. So stay with it. Next slide. And if you are to choose a first project, I'm gonna skip this because it says a lot about what we do. But the last point is, it's so important to talk about the work that you do. But I learned in California from the .com bust that if you talk too much, you end up not getting your work done, and then your company fails, and then the whole darn sector fails. So keep your head down early. Your first project is everything. Once you have a first success, paths and gates in life open up. So really be serious and be focused. Thanks. So our high-risk project that we took on was one that was a bit different from our normal program. This isn't a drug development. We're not producing a product here. We're addressing a global shortage and a cost problem with artemisinin and antimalarials. So artesunate, artemether, a little bit of artemether perhaps. This is the partnership with University of California, Berkeley, and QB3, Quantitative Biology 3, which is Berkeley, San Francisco, and Santa Cruz campuses. It is very high-risk science, synthetic biology, extremely elegant. We plan to build a metabolic system within E. coli, take the genes out of Artemisia, the plant that produces artemisinin and antimalarials, and put them into E. coli. It's something. There are high highs and low lows when the next gene does or doesn't hit it. But we are right on course. The project is 14 months in now. We're actually ahead of milestones, so we're quite pleased with the project. Next slide. Just a wrap up of it. So we're working with Kiesling Lab, chemical engineers at UC Berkeley, and Amyris, a small biotech startup, and OneWorld Health. So we will decide as OneWorld Health whether to be the producer, the fermenter of this product in E. coli, or to engage a pharmaceutical partner and have them do it and have them put their name on it. We'd need a substantial philanthropic donation and cut in cost of the product to do that. So we're still deciding. There's a lot of business plan work that needs to be done now in our organization, and we're paying some really expensive analysts to do that, and companies. So the purpose of the project, again, is for over 5 years, reduce the cost by 5-fold, we're saying, and guarantee that there's not a shortage again of these very fine antimalarials. So, to wrap up, there are many global infectious diseases that we can do something about. You read about preventable illnesses and deaths, and there really are, and you're working on many of them in your laboratories, as I learned today. It was a great day, by the way. Thank you. I was tired from it, which is good. Most of these problems, however, let's accept that they will not be solved by the current corporations or systems or governments. That's too bad, but it also is an opportunity. Take those problems and turn them into opportunities. See the positive side. We have to create the new solutions and the new paths. We can't imagine that those who are in a situation where something is not working will figure out what to do. Sometimes you need a freshness from the outside to figure it out. Next slide. So, here is the zinger for you, my challenge to you as an audience. And then we'll finish up. Who leads in global health? Does global health need a leader, I suppose, would be the first question. I think that the words of Conway, what is his first name? I've forgotten. He's the former president of the Rockefeller Foundation. Used a few words at a global health conference. He said, the state of global health is total anarchy. And if you think about it, everyone is doing their own thing and working by themselves. And my reflection on that was, but is that a problem? Is there one right way to do things? Is there one group who knows better than others? So who is leading? I'll tell you from partnerships with the WHO, it's not. Is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation leading? They're told, you are leading, whether they want to or not. They're told they're leading, and they say, we don't want to lead, we want to empower, we want to fund. So we have a reluctant leader. Is the NIH leading? Not in global health. In the CDC, perhaps in some element of global health and epidemiology, and some other spheres. There's a question of which continent is leading. Who cares more? Who has more schools of tropical medicine? Which governments give more money? Does that define leadership? And finally, this is it for you. Is Harvard the university that leads in global health? So here's my challenge on the next slide. They certainly have the most resources, okay, and get the most attention. So I have a proposal for you, for the state of Georgia, actually. I propose that Georgia has a critical mass of expertise and passion and vision and leadership. And if you got it all together, now that's the challenge, right? Get everyone to come together and work together, that you'd be quite a force to deal with. So I challenge you to do that. And all that you would need, you need three things to make this happen. You need passionate people, and you really have them in this group. I may not have named the alliance, the government alliance, correctly, and I'm sure I'm missing a few initiatives that we've talked about today. You have the people, very passionate, and in critical mass. You have the technologies, okay? They exist, or you can access them, okay? All that you need is funding, and I have that solved here too. Next slide, okay? What do you think about the Georgian Globalites? Isn't that good? Or the Georgian Dozen, or the Georgian Dreamers. You have that here too. You really, really do. And all you have to do is believe it. And go out and ask for it and make it happen. And as I offered today at lunch, if you need a nonprofit pharmaceutical company, we'll open an office in Georgia. I don't know that you do. If you decide to go the drug development path, then okay, there are lots of things you can do in global health. But I really encourage you to, can you back up one slide? Really think about taking a leadership role. Really thinking about leaving affiliations at the door, leaving egos at the door, so personal and professional, and really coming together. It's tremendous what you have, really is. I will tell you, though, to be honest, I'm working with the University of California and telling them the same thing. But I think that you're way ahead in terms of a probability of success compared to the University of California and Stanford. So I'm available for consultation anytime, pro bono. Okay? Okay, let me wrap it up now here. Okay, so in conclusion, a nonprofit pharmaceutical company can exist and should exist, needs to exist. Nonprofit vaccine companies, they're coming along. We know of two that we really helped, and they exist now. You'll hear from one of them in one of your lectures, one of the four speakers. And we're thriving. I'll tell you honestly, it's still hard. I have two sons, 13 and 7, and they balance I have a wonderful husband that works with me too. My children give us balance in life, but I don't get home for dinner enough. So I'm not saying anywhere here that it's easy. It's hard still. And I think that anything worthwhile is hard. And that's okay. If you're in a place in life where that's what you want to do. Industry and academic scientists are very anxious. Here you are, to get going and to advance technologies specifically for these neglected diseases. Young scientists give me hope for the future. The incredible volume of passion that comes through emails and letters from young people. Please, may I have just 2 minutes of your time? I'm going to live 100 years because of all of these technologies that we have. 100 more years, I'm going to be on this globe, okay? And it's a freaking mess. And I want to do something about it. I want to commit personally to do something about it. Please tell me what to do with my career, with my life. Just steer me toward a path, and then I'll take it. Just 2 minutes' time. And we don't have time. We're doing other things. So we have an email message that we send back. It doesn't matter what path you take. There are so many opportunities. There is not one path. There are so many paths. But keep that spark that you have. I said to a few of my hosts here today, I haven't been on an undergraduate campus in a while. UCSF is all graduate. I spend quite a bit of time there, and I guess I'm at Berkeley when classes are going on. I don't see the students. They look so young. Of course, I'm not aging myself. But that passion, it truly does give me hope that whatever we begin now will be taken on and continued by future generations. I absolutely believe that. I have no doubts at all. Leadership is desperately lacking. Don't let that be a deterrent. It just means that you may have to lead yourself at times. Keep that vision clear when you do lead. Industry does want to participate. They don't know how. They're waiting for you to ask, convince them to make it right for them. And it's not just the pharmaceutical industry. There are lots of industries. We have fantastic offers from IBM and Intel and I don't know who else, offering what they can to advance global health. I bet you could get one from Coca-Cola if you knocked on a door, yeah? And there's plenty of money in the world. You must believe that. There truly is plenty of money. It's our job as scientists. We don't do a good job of translating the importance of what we do, the significance of what we do. There is fear of biotechnology in Europe and therefore in Africa. How did that happen? That's our fault. That's our responsibility. And if we're unable to attract other families, other than the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, into global health, although Rockefeller's been there and the Wellcome family, which I don't think they exist anymore, but were there very, very early. If we can't invite any other families and convince them to be in global health, then that's our fault. It really is. We're not trying hard enough. Because there are many, many, many families who have considerable wealth, and they want to leave a legacy in the world. They want to leave an imprint, and they don't know what to do. They really don't know what to do, and they're begging. Okay, next slide. So, thank you to all of our partners, in particular the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. 98% of our funding. We've gotten to know them very well and would not be here without them. They believed in us early in technology and in entrepreneurs, and we put that together. That's what we're trying to do here, put them together. And all of our partners. And next slide. Thank you, Dan and Pat, and the university and the center. I think I forgot a word in the center. Global, yeah, oh my goodness. Yes, okay. I'll get next, invite me back next time, I'll get it right. Okay. No, this is it. This is my life philosophy. Never believe that a small number of people can change the world. It truly is the only thing that ever has. Thank you.